James is, amongst other things, the working group coordinator of the Open Shakespeare project for the Open Knowledge Foundation. I'm fascinated by this. The last thing I'd ever did professionally in the arts before I went into the creative industries, I'm not sure there's much difference, was direct Shakespeare on the stage. So I'm really intrigued by where you're, what you're up to and what's going on. If you give us an intro, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, lovely. So I'm going to begin very briefly with a few general observations, but of course we've had many general observations already, so I'll zip through to the case study pretty quickly. Just the general observations will be about opportunities, which, as I was introduced as being, I'm part of the Open Knowledge Foundation, which seeks to promote openness, and this is to do with a kind of situation at the moment where everyone has got amazingly powerful personal computers for the first time. More and more data is becoming available online, and these two are converging at a point where there comes a need for tools, and these tools need data that's open. They need APIs, ways of connecting with that data, and that's what the Open Knowledge Foundation is doing. It's promoting openness in the data and encouraging the use of tools that exploit this openness. And when I use the word openness, I'm using it in terms of the definition up there on the screen, which means free to use, reuse, and redistribute. And this has specific applications of Open Shakespeare that I'll get to a bit later. Of course, such openness leads to several interests, quite powerful phenomena. They lead to a creation of a community because everything's transparent. So you know what the data is, you know how your data is being used, you know what the program's doing, you know who's writing that program. Also, it leads to a feeling of togetherness because everything is open. If the programmers start taking the program in a way the majority of the community don't want it to do, well, the original program is still up online, so someone could easily found Open Shakespeare Mark II, the better version. And so there's always a pressure to keep with the desires of the community. Of course, there's the advantage of speed because everything's open, everyone can collaborate, many minds, it goes a lot quicker. However, some challenges that come with applying technology to literature in general, and some we've really felt with Open Shakespeare, is quite what data is. And for example, if you have Shakespeare, there are many variants on his text. So one line of Shakespeare actually exists in 4 different varieties. And so it's hard to kind of atomize a literary text, to analyze it, to use it in a program. Similar problems include maintaining an ecosystem where you've got the data up there, you've got a tool for it, and then someone uses that tool once and it's done. The best kind of things are where there's a kind of feedback cycle. So the tool feeds back into the data, generates new data that is itself open, and then grows the wealth of data, brings more possibilities for other tools to be created. Finally, and certainly not least, are media materials, particularly when you're working with a written text like Shakespeare's works. People don't read on a computer like they read in a book. And no one, to my knowledge, has tried to perform Shakespeare holding an iPad in their hand, not only for very obvious reasons. And some of the things we're looking at are how people are reading Shakespeare, how we can direct their reading, for example. Similar to the project about the pictures, we're also thinking of maybe for promoting comments on Shakespeare's plays, directing people to slightly random lines, because currently people are commenting just to be or not to be in very famous speeches. However, I'll get more precisely onto Open Shakespeare now. The website has several components. Everything on the website is open source, so it's reusable, redistributable. So on the website, you can, for example, compare text side by side. We're in the process of uploading lots of Shakespeare texts, which allow people to see what Hamlet in French is like against Hamlet in English. I found a Portuguese Hamlet translated by the King Louis I, which is going up now because it's public domain. You can also do statistical analysis. That's from the sonnets, and it's interesting to note that Shakespeare uses the word love more often than he uses the word with or be in the sonnets. You can do search as well, which gives you lots of opportunities as kind of online concordance, really, which exists already, but we're encouraging people to contribute word of the day articles to us, using the concordance to expose things in Shakespeare and to promote more use of it. So this is one on the word Bilbo in Shakespeare, and I encourage you to look at it if you're interested in hobbits and Shakespeare. There is a link, honestly, I wasn't making this up. Okay, but the main subject of my talk is annotation. This is an open source tool that we put online about half a year ago now. And it's one that's attracted by far the most statements of interest and so on. So you can, it allows, sorry, I've just lost my place in my talk. So yeah, what you can do with annotation, it's very simple. You double click on a word in Shakespeare's text and a little dialogue box appears. And when you click on that dialogue box and it opens up to this where you can type your thoughts on the play, you can tag them and you can save them. And anyone can do this. And so far we've built up 443 annotations in a couple of months over all of Shakespeare's plays. I won't go into details about what exactly they're like. Do feel free to ask me that in the questions later. Suffice to say, there's a great variety. Many of them are very technical. So, talking about how this developed. One last thing before I go. There is a great possibility for dialogue on the annotator because you can over-annotate lines. So if you see on the top left, the line with an auspicious and dropping eye with mirth in funeral, that's been annotated 3 times. One for dropping eye is tearful, again to say this is antithesis, and then someone else saying it's not quite antithesis, it's a type of antithesis called synosiosis, which taught me something. So how this came about and some of the things that might be interesting to you if you're looking to follow a similar model. So collaboration was really central to what we're doing. Shakespeare's parent organisation is Open Knowledge Foundation, and they put us in touch. Well, rather, they had programmers, and they looked for people interested in Shakespeare, because they had this idea of Open Shakespeare, and they wanted to use it with support from the literature community. So it was very much from programmers to people with interest in Shakespeare. I'm very much in the second group. They also hosted our mailing lists and promoted a real culture of sharing every thought we had. It all went on etherpads, it all went on track. Mailing lists were very busy with lots of different ideas, and so everyone was up to date with what was happening on the project. And one of the important things there was the emphasis on users, particularly when you get to some of the issues with this, is that Open Shakespeare brings together some very technical people who are writing the annotator in JavaScript and so on, and some people who have very little knowledge of technology. So, for example, the word I put up string there, because if you say string to a Shakespeare scholar, he will not be thinking of the same thing as a programmer. So our meetings helped us get over this. We shared ideas, programmers explained what they wanted, people interested in Shakespeare explained what they would like to do, and we tried as much as possible to model the annotator on a reader's experience. So, of course, when you read a paper book, what you do is you make annotations in the margin, and we wanted to try and replicate that as much as possible. Some other issues that we found was abuse of the tool. We've got around that slightly by making all annotations that are unattributed editable by anyone. You can log in and your name gets recorded with your annotation, or you can do it anonymously, but anonymous ones can be edited. So people who go on there to spam, of course, are spamming anonymously, and it's relatively trivial just to delete those. We also have a small team of experts who look and put slight corrections on, including the one about synosiosis earlier. Finally, and perhaps most interesting, is to do with generic nature of tools. Because the programmers very much wanted the annotator to be completely generic, and it's true, it can be run as a bookmarklet on any website. And that was one of the great powers of the tool. But of course, it would also be useful to make it specific to Shakespeare. So you could have tags, for example, early Shakespeare play or Shakespeare's life in the annotator. So there's always this slight tension, and we're still looking at how to resolve this. But the kind of scalability of the tool was an important thing we wanted to preserve. Last thing about impact. As regards business models, this is very much a kind of thing to promote open data, open source, and its possible applications in the humanities. We've had lots of interest from academic journals, for example, and also, interestingly, the New York Times has also created an annotation tool, but it's slightly less sophisticated than ours in that you can only comment on paragraphs, which of course wouldn't work for something like a Shakespeare play. So obviously this is a very interesting topic, and we're looking at kind of sources of crowdfunding, for example, to keep it going. I've just put an application on crowdfunder.com for it. Other things to do with audience engagement in terms of impacts. We've had lots of different contributors all over the world. Interestingly, you can assess the impact numerically because we count the annotations, we display the number of annotations, and that also creates a kind of game environment. Because at first we didn't have a count of the number of annotations on our front screen. We put it up, and the rate of annotations shot up because people thought, yeah, we'll get to 500 on Hamlet, we're hitting milestones. So just little things like that really increased user experience and number of users on our website. Finally, learning from the project. So a few of our failures was to integrate Open Shakespeare into university and school systems. Cambridge actually has a course where students have to annotate Shakespeare, and we're gradually trying to push them towards using our website for it, as well as teaching it in traditional methods, and they hope to do it next year maybe. Also, because this is open source, you can take away the whole program code and run the website in an internal network. So you could run it in a school, for example, where all the school children could annotate Shakespeare for their homework without being exposed to all the nasties on the web. That's something we look to do next year as well, the partner school in Hertfordshire. The success is, of course, the large audience engagement, and in fact, we had lots of global contributions. People from America, from China, from India have all been in touch with us saying this is really interesting, do keep going. Finally, continuation, we would like better tagging, maybe an option to direct our crowdsourcing a little, so to move towards random lines that haven't been annotated in Hamlet, for example. And of course, expansion into schools and so on as a real learning tool. And because I haven't actually quoted Shakespeare this entire talk, I finish by saying that we are with Lady Macbeth in her sentiments, but not her actions when she says, "Screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail." And that's it.
Thank you, James.